could like, I could like, from the very first time that I set my eyes on you. I said to myself when I picked up my chest, I go marry you, baby. She fine like an angel that come from above me, I want you. Yeah, you stay with me, don't run now, run now. Even if you take far, my love will be close to you. Oh yeah, oh yeah, yeah. Whenever you need me, my girl, I go there for you, for you. Only you say you can stay, you not run from me. Please don't run from me. Cause me, I want you, girl, I don't go run from you. Baby, follow me, go. I give you love, follow me, go. Let's go and stay, follow me, go. I give you joy, you follow me, go. You be my girl, follow me, go. I give you love, follow me, go. Let's go and stay, follow me, go. I give you my heart, follow me, go. Yeah. Let's go to our place where my mama no go see me, where your mama no go see us, where we go there happy. Make we start new life, make we start living our life, make we start new life, make we start feeling our life. Baby, you know say I want you. I can never change you for gold, I can never change you for silver, cause you make me feel love. Those days I feel so loved. You come to my heart and you give me love. You come to my heart and you give me joy. Never will I ever let you go. Follow me, go. I give you love. Follow me, go. Let's go and stay. Follow me, go. I give you joy. Follow me, go. You be my girl. Follow me, go. I give you love. Follow me, go. Let's go and stay. Follow me, go. I give you my heart. Follow me, go. Yeah. Me, I never use you play. Me, I go day outside. That I say now you are want. That I say now you are shoes. Cause you give me life. Yeah, you give me joy. You give me joy. Yeah, me, I cannot lie. You're the only one way me, I want, baby. I can never do without you, baby. She do me something. She do me something. She do me something.
Peace and love, wonderful Black Hot Fire family. Welcome to the 54 Correspondent Show on the Black Hot Fire Network. I hope that everyone is doing well on the 15th day of June, the year 2021. And ICC Celebria, thank you so much for joining us. You're saying hi, family. Hi to you too. How are you doing? I hope that your days are coming up just fine. It's actually 28 minutes past 2 p.m. right here in Nairobi. And on the 54 Correspondent Show, we come together and discuss issues that have to do with news and updates, and also topical matters around the beautiful continent of Africa. You can also call the continent Al-Kebulan, which was the name used, the original name used for Africa. I do believe over different periods, different names have been used for Africa. And maybe, who knows, even in the next 2,000 years, the name for Africa perhaps might have changed, and people might have decided to adopt, the earlier or the original name, which perhaps was Al-Kebulan. But even before that, we have also seen other different African countries embrace different names. And the saddest thing, when it comes to the name of different African countries, you do find some of the countries not even having names. We have talked about the Central African Republic, which is really not a name. It's like a direction, or it's like a position where this particular country is positioned on the map of Africa. We also do have South Africa. I do believe they should be claiming their original name. We also do have countries such as Western Sahara. Western Sahara has decided to adopt a different name. Right now, it's actually going by the popular name, which is Sahrawi. We have also seen other different countries also rebrand or take up different names. Others deciding to change to a new name. Others deciding to go back to revert to an older name. For example, we do have Botswana, which was also known as Bechuana land. But these days, it goes by the name Botswana. It has changed. We also do have Swaziland, which did change its name. It was formerly known as Swaziland. These days, it's known as Eswatini. And using those few examples, you realize that, the names get to change every other minute. And of course, it's dependent on the peoples or the leadership of these particular countries when they do decide to change their names. Because I do believe in some points there is a referendum. For example, even with the Congo Brazzaville, at some point it was not known as the Congo Brazzaville. We also do have Zambia and Zimbabwe, which of course had been taken over by Cecil Rhodes, and he named them Northern Rhodesia and Southern Rhodesia. Southern Rhodesia being a Zimbabwe, and Northern Rhodesia being a Zambia. But I would like to challenge, the African people in all different African countries to come together, really, regardless of whether you're coming from Bechuanaland or South Africa or Eswatini, which is Swaziland, or even Western Sahara, which is Sahrawi. Whatever country you might be coming from, my challenge is really for African people to see ourselves as one people without the borders. Because once we do so, we can be able to build together as a people, regardless of whatever place that you are on the continent of Africa. I have had the opportunity to interact with people from Sierra Leone. I've also had the opportunity to interact with the people from Togo, and also interact with the people from Nigeria and other parts of the continent of Africa, and just have a conversation. And I think for the larger part, most people do not know what is happening beyond their countries. For the larger part, if you ask someone from Togo what happens in the neighboring country, even in Ghana, they have no idea. If you ask someone from Kenya what happens in Uganda, people have no idea, because people have been so much concentrated on what is happening in their own small locality. We have been unable to think global. We have been unable to think Pan-African, which I do believe should be the goal of every other young person on the continent of Africa, to also have an interest and find out what is happening in your neighboring country, what is happening in the continent of Africa. What do really happen is that even the education system does not encourage that. What you do have on the continent of Africa, I would also like to blame it also on the education system. But there are positives. I do believe eventually people will be able to, break down the barriers, and especially using the internet. I do believe the internet is one strong tool which should be used by everyone. But also the other challenge is that the cost of internet is very, very high on the continent of Africa. If you're talking about being able to access social media, being able to access different platforms, the cost of internet is still very, very high for most of the African countries. When I was in Uganda, was it last year or last year but one? Yes, last year but one. When I was in Uganda, I had to walk. I didn't have any internet on my phone. Because of course I didn't have a local line, and I had to walk, some distance before finding the next cyber cafe. We do have what you call cyber cafes in Kenya, but these days I do believe also the cyber cafes are being phased out, where you go and access the internet and also maybe do a few printing. When I was in Uganda, I couldn't find cyber cafes around where we were. And mind you, we were at the Namayiba bus park. I do believe it's called the Namayiba bus park, which is one of the biggest bus parks. But I was trying to get on the internet, and I had to walk. So you realize I do believe the internet can be used as a tool by Africans to really connect us. And really, I do believe it's also the role of every other different African to arouse their curiosity, to find out what is happening in Namibia, what is happening in Botswana, what is happening in my neighboring country. Also, the challenge is very, very big because of poverty. One of the things I think is poverty. Like I said, even be able to find some disposable income to engage on, research and information. That is also a difficulty on the continent of Africa. But nonetheless, I would like to charge every other person who gets to watch this particular video, get some interest, arouse your curiosity in terms of finding out what is happening in different parts of Africa. And when you do, you will realize that we are all the same. When we went to Rwanda, that was also 2 years ago, when we were in Rwanda, we happened to realize the same thing. People do communicate in Swahili, others are not able to communicate in Swahili, but the local languages also are Bantu languages, and therefore is the same thing. Even if you're coming from here going to Rwanda, you realize you're just one people. Leave Rwanda and go to South Africa or go to Zimbabwe, you realize that we are just one people, and that is the kind of a spirit we need to have, regardless of what country you're coming from. Being an African, being a black person, we need to have that particular kind of an understanding. Even if you are in the States, you might be in the States, in Louisiana, you might be in New Jersey, you might be in Florida, you might be in Texas, and you're a black person, an African American. I do believe we are one, and we should also act as such. But the problem is there has been a lot of division. Yesterday on the show, on the Tujadili 254 show, or even was it on the Tujadili on the Expo show, we were talking about one of the African proverbs, and one of the African proverbs I was reading that if you want to eat an elephant, on your way, if you want really the best way, it actually reads, the best way to eat an elephant in your path is to cut him up into pieces. The best way to eat an elephant in your path is to cut him up into little pieces. And you realize That is the thing that was done to Africa. Africa was cut up into little pieces because it was a big elephant on the path of the European. So what did happen is there was a lot of a division along different lines. Some lines were tribal, other lines, of course, were geographical lines. Before the 1884 Berlin Conference, I always keep on saying before the 1884 Berlin Conference, we did not have Kenya, we did not have Tanzania, we did not have Uganda, we did not have all these different countries that did pop up. But we did have kingdoms. I understand, yes, we did have kingdoms. We did have the Congo Empire. We did have the Songhai Empire. We did have, the Timbuktu. We did have all these different sorts of kingdoms under different leadership. But nonetheless, we were one vast continent where people could move freely. It doesn't matter whether you're moving from Timbuktu or Mali going into Kemet, which is Egypt. It doesn't matter whether you're moving from Kenya. We didn't have Kenya then. It was just one big area. But of course, things were still happening under different leaders in those areas. It doesn't mean that there was a gap of leadership. There was leadership in these areas. And I do believe that we should still have that particular kind of a mentality of having then one people under these big, vast continent of ours, which we do call Africa. But like I said, there has been a challenge. Even moving around is not easy. You need to have a passport and a visa. Moving from one African country going into the other. I do believe if we did have visa-free kind of an arrangement for people to move, especially even in different blocks, perhaps if you're from the Eastern Bloc where you do have the ECOWAS, sorry, not the ECOWAS, but the COMESA, which is a common market for East and Southern African states, perhaps you would be able to have a much better understanding and a much better kind of a cohesiveness as African people. But yes, we do have these boundaries and we do have these challenges even in traveling, but that does not limit people from having that curious spirit and of course that particular kind of a zeal to work together as the African people. Because if you move from Kenya, go to the DRC Congo, you realize people are facing the same challenges. If you move from Kenya, go into Namibia, which is on the South African in South Africa, you will also realize that people are facing the same challenges. Even if you go from here to Djibouti, which is a tiny country, or Eritrea, which is also another tiny country, or Togo, or Sierra Leone, or Senegal, you realize that we are facing the same challenges as the African people. But nonetheless, on the 54 Correspondent Show, we do not only want to talk about challenges, we also want to also talk about solutions. And I was saying, using the internet as a tool, we can be able to go faster. We can be able to come together faster. And that way we can be able to build up our beautiful African continent. But nonetheless, there has been the matter of the peace process, and this is in Sudan. For a very, very long time, we have had, differences in the mindset and also all the differences in the ideologies in terms of leadership. And also, there has been the issue of greed. If you ask me, what does happen? We do have a Salva Kiir, who is one of the leaders. And we also do have, we call him Riek Machar. We do have a Riek Machar. And we also do have Salva Kiir, who, of course, at some point were the leader and the deputy leader in Sudan. But because of greed, I do believe, because of greed and because of also differences in ideologies, we have seen a rift between these two leaders. And this has resulted also into the fighting that is led by the people who are, who are on the different sides of either, on the Riek Machar side or also on the Salva Kiir side. And there has been a quest for a peace process. There has been a peace process going on, which of course has been led and intervened at some point even by the Kenyan leader, Uhuru Kenyatta. And also the process, of course, at some other incidences have also been led by other different leaders. But nonetheless, this is in the southern part of Sudan, South Sudan. But we also do have the same challenge, the leadership crisis and the instability also in the main Sudan. Because if you go back into about 20 years ago, we did not have South Sudan and Sudan. It was just one country. But right now, there is some hopes. There is some hopes in Sudan because there is a peace process going on. And you realize that there has been an institutionalizing of a national dialogue. And this particular national dialogue is meant at putting the citizen at the center of this process, so that the citizens are not just passive onlookers or passive observers in Sudan. You will see these particular processes being done, and of course, you also do have what you call the open barazas. In Swahili, in Kenya, we call them the open barazas, where also the members of the public are involved. We talked about sometimes back the citizen participation in terms of the programs that are meant to bring cohesion in a nation. There should also be an involvement of the citizens. And there has been a civil war which broke out in December 2013, and of course in South Sudan has actually effectively been locked in a never-ending peace process. In this time, the country has witnessed dozens of momentous handshakes and several supposed milestones on the path to ending the conflict that has killed hundreds of thousands and displaced 3.8 million people, contributing to about 8.3 million people being in need of humanitarian assistance in this particular country. So the first peace agreement was signed in August 2015 in South Sudan, which lasted for a year before the government and the South Sudan Liberation Movement, in opposition, the SPLM, began fighting again. And the second was signed in 2018, September 2018, and has faced resistance and delays from the start. And of course, apart from that, there is also now the ongoing peace process, which is of course started way back also in December 2016. And like I said, we do have the two leaders. Salva Kiir, the president Salva Kiir, who did announce the intention to launch a national dialogue to save the country from disintegrating and usher a new era of peace. But you also do have Riek Machar. Riek Machar was the deputy for some point, but even him was not able to deliver, because they had talked about having a government which is a national government which has been formed, and having or showing representation from different sides, and also bringing in the rebel forces or some of the representatives who have been involved in this militia. But even till today, that wasn't to work from 2016. But there is a new hope right now, even as a new peace process is being sought after, and the push for the national dialogue in Sudan. The only problem with the national dialogue, like I said, most of the times you do find interest. You do find the interest diverging, people having a divergent interest in this particular kind of a national dialogue. But if people were to be serious, I also think there is a destabilizing of these countries also with the impact or the influence from the West. Because if you were to look at Sudan, you realize that Sudan is a country, when it was one block, Sudan was one of the biggest countries, of course, most of it being dry and arid and semi-arid. But apart from that, you realize that they also are endowed with oil. Sudan was one of the largest oil producing countries on the continent of Africa. And when we look at some of the oil producing countries in Africa, you realize that the endowment with this resource, oil, and instability, they go hand in hand. If you go to Angola is also another country where we have had the country also being endowed with oil resource. And there is always turmoil, there is always insecurity, there is always a dysfunction, fighting dysfunction. And I do believe most of the time there's also the external factor, which has not been considered for the better part in these countries. But that is Angola. We also do have Sudan. We also do have Nigeria. These are 3 countries. I'm just getting to name some of the countries that have big or vast oil resources on the continent of Africa, and then look at how stable or how unstable they are. There is always insecurity. Nigeria, Angola, Sudan, these are some of the biggest oil producing countries on the continent of Africa. If there is an instability and fighting, there is tyranny, or there is the leaders who hold these particular countries being like their own, like chiefdoms. I would call them chiefdoms, where they run everything from A to Z. We know about Equatorial Guinea. Equatorial Guinea is another tiny country which also has vast resources of oil. Equatorial Guinea has been run by one president for 40 years. And we have shown right here on the 54 Correspondent Show that Equatorial Guinea, you do find like less than 10% of the population living in extreme, how can I call it? Wealth. They have amassed about over 90% of the wealth of that particular country. And the rest of the 90% is living in abject poverty. 90% living in abject poverty, and the 10% or less than 10% getting to enjoy the resources, which is oil, because they do get to sell their oil into the neighboring countries and also export it into outside Africa. But you do find that the people also do not get to benefit anything in Equatorial Guinea from this usage of the oil and the resource and other resources, because in West Africa, like I said, this country is also it has a rich arable land. You know, there is the potential for agriculture in this particular country, and therefore you realize that even if there is big potential, you know, the exploitation of these particular resources, even with the rich and arable land, is minimal, because people are still living in abject poverty at the end of the day. But nonetheless, talking about insecurity, the problem is when you talk about Africa, I do not want to be too much skewed or towards that what is wrong, what are the negatives on the continent of Africa. I also want to share with us some of the positives. I said before we go on to the next feature story, I said there was a harvest. You know, there was a very big harvest. There was a very big harvest in Zimbabwe. And these also did necessitate the government to stop the importing of maize from the neighboring countries, which is actually a good thing. You know, if you look at for so many years, you have realized that for so many years, Zimbabwe has been calling for help from the outside and also importing a lot of food from the outside. For one, I do believe the food insecurity situation in that particular country has largely been driven by the fact that, you know, people are not using the land, are not putting the land that they do have into proper use. And there is not also support from the government to enable people also put in the seed on the ground and also conduct proper cultivation in Zimbabwe. But this year, yes, there has been an increase in the harvest this year, which is really a good thing. And it's really positive news getting to share with us on the 54 correspondence, because I don't want to be like, oh, we do have a fighting in Nigeria. We do have a fighting. There are positives also on the beautiful continent of Africa, which is really also something that is heartwarming. And apart from the bumper harvest in Zimbabwe, we also did have some other positive news coming from Zambia. And these news are all pertaining to the construction of the bridge connecting Zambia and Botswana. We have shared that earlier on the 54 correspondence, which is also another positive. Now the people of Botswana can be able to go into Zambia and conduct business and trade, because I do believe infrastructure is one of the biggest necessities for any country to be able to up its trade and also attract investment. So we might see investment are being, investors are being attracted to these two countries, Botswana and Zambia. But we already know what is happening in Zambia. There is the election process right now going on, the campaign, the election right now. And we shall also be getting to updates on what is happening with the elections in Zambia. Because as it is, the elections are slated for Thursday, the 12th of August. And therefore, right now, as it is, the campaign has been on high charge. The campaign has been on high charge. But we shall still get into updates on what is happening, because the incoming president, he goes by the name of Edgar Lungu. He is expected to, he is actually vying for another term. He's actually hoping to vie for another term. But even when he is, the problem is we do have leaders who are not contributing any value to a country. And I call them leaders, quote unquote leaders. This is a president who has served another term already, but he hopes to go on and get a second term. But even as he does, we have seen situations where he has collapsed, on national TV. He has collapsed on national TV during a public event. And of course, they did say it was from fatigue. They actually do say he did collapse from fatigue. But this is the kind of a leader we do have. I think we need an injection of a young leadership on the continent of Africa. We do not need. I know even a young leader is also susceptible to challenges like this. But the president did collapse from dizziness during a televised ceremony on TV. But we shall be keeping tabs on this. Like I said, the elections are slated for August, which is just a month from now. And we shall be getting to update you on Sunday. The country's president did collapse, And of course, there was during the televised annual ceremony for the National Defense Forces Day, which was immediately interrupted following the incident. And the 64-year-old head of state who is running for re-election in August suffers from a rare disease, which is known as achalasia. The condition affects the esophagus and causes hypoglycemic attacks. And the president was collapsing during this particular incident that did take place. And I would say, for me, I think he should take a rest. He has already sold out the country to the Chinese. But I do believe the Chinese will also be very, very much eager to get him back on board. And this is a little bit of the same.
Zambian President Edgar Lungu fainted on Sunday during the country's televised official annual ceremony for the National Defense Forces Day, which was immediately interrupted following the incident. The 64-year-old head of state, who is running for re-election in August, suffers from the rare disease achalasia, which affects the esophagus, causing hypoglycemic attacks, had previously taken ill and been hospitalized in 2015. Sunday afternoon, apparently Sokungu experienced a sudden dizzy spell, but Zambia's leader has since recovered and continues to perform his duties, as per the official statement from the presidency. Edgar Lungu first took office in 2015 and maintained his powerful position in a disputed election the year after. His official bid to partake in this year's presidential race has been met with controversy.
And like you hear, he shall be he is vying for another term in office. But for me, I do believe, these kinds of leaders, they should be getting and they should be just exiting. But I do highly suspect that Edgar Lungu, who did faint from dizziness, will be getting back, because I do believe they want leaders like this. When there was the ouster of the president of Zimbabwe, he goes by the name Robert Mugabe. Of course, he died a year later. I do believe there was said to be a Chinese influence on the same, because the Chinese are also keen on taking over Zimbabwe, not just Zambia. And therefore, the politics of these two countries, Zambia and Zimbabwe, are so much, they have been infiltrated by the Chinese. And therefore, I do believe they might see Edgar Lungu going back. Like you said, there is the election in Zambia. We might see Edgar Lungu still preserving, remaining to be the president, because with being the incumbent, there are all sorts of structures and systems to help them rig the elections. We have seen the same happen. It shall not be the first time in Nigeria with the President Buhari. Even before the elections were conducted, we saw him congratulating himself and saying, he will be winning, and he congratulates himself. So he knew already what he had done, and he had altered the system, and that is the way it works in his favor. For other countries, we have seen Malawi. In Malawi, we did have also the cancelling, all the blocking of the results, because there was rigging and a lot of irregularities with that particular process. And I do believe this is a problem that has our people, remaining in the same kind of leadership problems at the end of the day. But nonetheless, I want to move from that and go on to other matters. That is the Southern African nations. I want to update us on the growing business, or the growing, let me call it the growing business, because that is exactly what it is. And this business has to do with marijuana. We have seen different African countries adopting the growing of marijuana for commercial purposes. I do believe this is a good thing personally, because it actually unlocks the opportunities and the market for these particular products in high demand. So Morocco has moved towards legalizing medical marijuana, and Morocco's government has approved a landmark bill that would legalize non-recreational use of marijuana, which is actually the way to go, because it brings in the cash. It brings in the cash, because for most African countries, we are cash strapped. If you look at the budgets for many African countries, you realize a big budget. I am not sure, I might be mistaken, but I am not sure of any African country that has a budget surplus. I'm not sure. Let me just check out and see if there is any. From what I do check here, I do not see any African country with a budget surplus. I do not see any country on Africa with a budget surplus, but I will be digging onto that. But I highly suspect that we do not have any African country with a budget surplus, and that is why I'm saying I do believe it's a good thing for the government to also look at other ways of bringing in cash, and one of the ways really would be legalizing marijuana. So that people are able to also engage with the farming of this particular one. I do believe also in other different Southern African countries there has been the allowing of farmers to farm this particular marijuana when they do have the license. But the government on Thursday approved the bill that would legalize non-recreational use of marijuana, largely motivated by the growing international demand for medical and industrial cannabis. The move will set the North African Kingdom among the top global producers on the path of creating a regulated market for an industry that has long been dominated by drug traffickers. And I do believe one of the things that has also hindered people from getting engaged in this particular one is because the government, they have their own channels. For example, these government leaders, they have their own channels of moving marijuana and cannabis and trading it under the protection of the security forces, and they get to make the most money themselves, because it's illegal. For example, in Kenya, the sale of the growing of marijuana is illegal, and therefore it doesn't mean that if you will not get your hand on marijuana. If you wanted to get marijuana in Nairobi, it wouldn't be very, very difficult. I don't think you would take more than half an hour getting marijuana if you wanted to get marijuana in Nairobi. But the thing is, there are these channels, there are these backdoor channels, you might call them so, and these are also run by cartels. They are also run, and the government also knows. I do believe the government perhaps also does know, but it has been made illegal so that these top government officials might be able to benefit the most from it being illegal, because they are the only ones who do have that particular kind of backing or the security to be able to continue with the trade of the same. But if it passes, Morocco would be one of the few countries in the region or in the Arab world to legalize the drug for non-recreational use. Non-recreational recreational use would remain illegal. Recreational use would remain illegal. So they're saying it's for medical purposes only, but for recreational purposes, it still would remain illegal. Morocco is seeking to establish a regular framework for the entire chain of the cultivation, the production, the processing, and the marketing of cannabis for medical, cosmetic, and industrial uses such as textiles, all paper. Personally, I do not know about the cosmetic use of marijuana, so I would not speak much on the same. If someone knows how marijuana is used for cosmetic purposes, please do let me know. But I do know that it has medical purposes. It has been used for pain reduction and also for managing other kinds of medical conditions, which is it's really a good thing. If we have more people perhaps being allowed to get into that particular one, because at the end of the day, like I said, many countries are cash strapped. We do not have channels of getting more money into the budget or into the tax net, not just the tax net, but just really helping with the budgets. I think that would also be another thing. The Ugandan government has also been involved with the same kind of an arrangement. Uganda enacted one of the stringent laws to curb the use of cannabis, but at the same time allowed the commercialization of the project. The Ugandan government spent over 264,000 to secure high-quality cannabis seeds in 2019. They also secured buyers from Germany and Canada after getting approval from the European Union in 2019. Other countries that have legalized commercial use and the export of cannabis in Africa are Lesotho. We also do have Zambia and Zimbabwe, and those are some of the countries that have approved, the commercial use and the trading of marijuana. But like I said, there is a lot of control. It's not a liberal market where the buyer and the seller are allowed to get it, to go on with their business. It's not like that. It doesn't happen actually in that particular kind of regard. It's very, very much different. But nonetheless, I wanted to go from that particular matter and I'll go on to the topic of the day. There has been the politics of West Africa. And the West African politics are closely tied to the French. Most West African nations were actually former colonies of the French. And it's also worth noting that West African nations have the highest history, or have a long history of coups compared compared to other countries on the continent of Africa. If you look at a country like Sierra Leone, if you look at a country like Senegal, look at a country like Mali. Mali has had a coup as recent as last month, and we are living in the 21st century, but we are still talking about our coups in West African states. And therefore, especially with the military